Foreigners don't believe me. I don't blame them though. It's the kind of thing you have to experience to believe. Sadly, I had to experience it. There's a tunnel in my town. It's one of those huge tunnels cars can pass through. There's no purpose to it being there, it just is. It's made out of stone and it's covered in graffiti. Now, I grew up near this tunnel, but my family always avoided it. They constantly would go to extremes not to drive through it, or even go on the same road it was on. They never told me why though. I've done some research and talked to my best friend's father, who's a local police officer. Here's what I found. Back in the 70s, a couple was driving through the tunnel and they saw their names on the wall, written in what didn't look like graffiti. One described it as a paint-like substance. Anyways, they shrugged it off, but about a mile later, they crashed into a tree. The car itself caught on fire, and they both died at the scene. Now, many people look at this as a freak accident, or merely a coincidence. But this isn't the only story. A couple years later, an old man who frequently drove through the tunnel on his way to work saw his name appear one afternoon. He was said to never believe in superstition, but he suffered from a heart attack right as he left the tunnel. The doctors said he had had heart problems and it had nothing to do with the tunnel, but others argue that it did. There are about 5 other incidents that relate to names in the tunnel. One teenage girl had a seizure, a woman wrecked her car inside the tunnel, the marks of which are still visible on the wall, and a group of friends report hearing a banging on the outside of their car while driving through it. I tried to contact them to ask more, but they refused to talk about it. When you pass through the tunnel, you see many names, most of them written by teenage pranksters attempting to scare their friends, but the same names from back in the 70s still remain. They're sloppily written and barely legible, but all the same handwriting and written in the same substance. In the 90s, the police wrote it off as a serial killer, but it still bothers me that if it started in the 70s, you'd think it would have ended by now. Just a couple months ago, a younger man, early 30s, who was a foreigner, claimed that when he entered the tunnel, he saw a dark figure standing at the end, reaching a hand towards him. He slammed on his brakes to avoid hitting it, then he said it disappeared. I looked down to grab my phone and call the police, but when I looked up, it was gone. I haven't driven through that tunnel since, he quoted in an interview. The story that upsets me the most is known as the Dixon case around here. Charlie Dixon was a father of 2 sons in his late 40s. Police have no idea what happened, but they came across him late at night, his car parked inside the tunnel. He was sitting with his arms around his knees outside the car, facing the stone wall. His name was written just above where he was sitting/looking. He didn't say anything as officials drove him to the station. The next day, he claimed not to remember anything. He simply stated that he just stopped in the tunnel. Everything else was a blur. Most of these stories of sighting and knocking on the car I don't believe. Well, I didn't used to. I am now 17, and I have my own car. I'm currently writing this the day after the incident. It's June 27th, 2018, at 5:39 a.m. I didn't sleep at all last night. I was too shaken up. Yesterday, I was driving to the store. My mom had given me the annoying task of getting groceries. The route to the closest store was through the tunnel. My mom told me specifically not to drive through it, but the alternate route was a 30-minute drive that I didn't feel like driving. I ignored my mother and got into the car. I was driving down the road as I entered the tunnel. The tunnel was dark as usual, even though it was around 2 p.m. I wasn't that scared, but of course I glanced at the wall for my name. It wasn't there. I sighed in relief and continued driving. As I was about to exit the tunnel, I heard a loud screech, almost like a knife on metal against the side of my car. I panicked and swerved the car. I pushed on the gas and drove out of there. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw a black figure, his arm extended towards the wall, almost touching it. My mind blocked it out for the remainder of the day. I got groceries and went home, taking the long way on my ride back. As I say this, I have chills. I'm paranoid already. Long story short, just don't go through that tunnel. And if you do, I hope to God that you don't see your name.